Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is In a Rain of Arrows. W.J. Miller of Oklahoma rode 30 years ago. The subheadline says, 27 struck, one in his breast, which the x-ray is to find. This article originally came from Kingfisher in Oklahoma Territory on January 17th in a special edition. It says, the Cheyenne Sunbeam says, W.J. Miller, the Sweetwater stockman whom everybody knows, has been here some 2 weeks under medical treatment, and the doctors have now decided to take him to Kansas City, where an investigation will be made by the aid of x-rays to locate an arrowhead which is supposed to have been lodging in his breast since 1869. Mr. Miller is a typical Westerner, having lived on the frontier since boyhood. Large in size and jolly in disposition, no one would guess on seeing him that he has passed through experiences calculated to make a man look old before his time. But in fact, Mr. Miller looks 10 years younger than the average man of his age, notwithstanding several deep cuts on his face and neck left by arrow wounds. In September 1869, he, in company with a man named Wash Morrow, were returning from mill in a 4-horse wagon, near the line of San Saba and McCulloch counties, Texas, when a band of 12 Indians, driving stolen horses, came upon them. Both Miller and his companion had a pistol each, and as the Indians commenced circling and shooting arrows at them, Miller, who was driving, fired 2 shots at them. This frightened the team, which ran away over very rough ground. To enable him to drive better, Miller had to put his pistol under his thigh on the wagon seat, and from there it was jolted to the ground and lost. After running about 3 miles, the horses dumped the wagon into a gulch, and before the 2 men had recovered from the shock, the Indians cut loose the 2 lead horses and drove them off. Morrow's pistol was an old cap and ball, and he had but 1 load, but with this he managed to scare the Indians back while Miller got the wheel horses loose. Then both men mounted and made a dash for liberty. They had run but a short distance when Morrow's horse was killed, throwing its rider heavily to the ground. Miller stopped and helped his companion on behind him, and they made another ride of about 2 miles when loss of blood caused Miller to faint and fall to the ground. Morrow stayed with him, and the Indians again closed around them, but at a distance. Morrow turned the horse loose and drove it away in the hope that the Indians would be satisfied if they got all the stock. This hope was realized. After securing the horse and holding a short consultation, the Indians rode off, evidently thinking that the men were still armed and that they had decided to sell their lives as dearly as possible. The above happened early in the morning. All that day and the following night, the wounded men lay where they fell, burning with thirst and racked with pain, but too weak to help themselves, although in plain hearing of the rushing waters of the San Saba River. The following morning Morrow, refreshed somewhat by the keen night air, started to fetch Miller some water in his boot, but Miller crawled after him and got there almost as soon as he did. Thoroughly refreshed and resting themselves, the wounded men finally started for home, which they safely reached after suffering untold agony. Most of the arrows had been jerked out by the sufferers during the fight, but some were taken out after they reached home. Ever since that terrible experience, Mr. Miller suffered at intervals with hemorrhage, and it was an attack of that character which brought him to Cheyenne for medical aid. In pulling out one of the arrows from his breast, Mr. Miller thinks that the head caught against the inside of his rib, and that he pulled out the shaft only, leaving the head embedded in his lung. It is to locate this arrowhead that the x-rays will be used. 7 years after the fight, Mr. Miller had an arrow point cut out of his thigh, and he believes that the removal of the one from his breast will lead to his entire recovery. This story came from the great state of Kansas, being reported in the Wichita Daily Eagle of January 18th, 1899. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.